myself a promise. I won't quit, keep going till I got it. I won't give up till I'm on top.
Yo, what's up, chefs? Hope you're having a good time in the dungeons today. In this video, I'm going to be going over why I think gear score based matchmaking, at least in its current state, is pretty bad for the game. And to be specific, the problem it intended to fix actually just got worse with its implementation. There'll also be some gameplay running throughout the video that should highlight how bad it really is once you know how the system works. Finally, I'll be going over the exact gear I'm using as well as the gear score calculation at the end of the video, so if you're interested in building a kit like this of your own, make sure to stick around for that. Before we get to the gameplay though, just going to give a brief overview of the build I'm running throughout all of these clips except for the last one. Starting off with the perks, I've got the bread and butter of this build, which is Dark Reflection plus Soul Collector, which synergize incredibly well with one another, as once you've collected 10 darkness shards, it amplifies your next dark reflection proc by 100%, which I've done the math with this kit, and a normal dark reflection proc is doing like 24 to 25 damage, so with 10 shards that'll be close to 50 magic damage just for hitting me with a melee attack. Also, I don't know why they're called darkness shards instead of soul shards considering the name of the perk, but I digress. Following that, we've got Shadow Touch, which even after the nerf still provides some nice sustain, which is quite useful with this build since we won't have a ton of consumables to bring into raid. And finally, for my last perk, I take Anti-Magic, but I think this slot is probably up for grabs because I play a lot of solos and I very rarely actually run into other magic damage builds personally. So you could consider taking Malice, Dark Enhancement, or even Demon Armor if you wanted to go a tankier, albeit slower build. As for the skills, there's no debate here as both Blow of Corruption and Phantomize are must-haves for this type of build. As we hop into the gameplay here, I want to give a couple quick disclaimers. One, I'm not against some sort of matchmaking system being implemented into the game, and actually think that the rank-based version that was being used prior to this was pretty good and definitely better in almost all aspects, but it probably could have used some tweaks like maybe Pathfinder and above instead of Wanderer and above, just for thought. Two, there were in fact a lot of Timmies hurt during the creation of this video, and before you point the finger at me, I implore you to remember that it was Ironmace that made this change and applied it to the game, not me. Also, as a third and final disclaimer, there will be, and there probably already has been, a lot of yapping in this video, so if you're not into that, then feel free to mute and just enjoy the gameplay. As I proceed to run a marathon trying to catch up to this bard before he inevitably gets yapped, I'll go ahead and get into some of my thoughts / feedback on the system and why I think it's pretty bad. Initially, I want to touch on how it's actually worsened the problem it intended to fix, and to do that, we first got to address the reason these systems are even being implemented, and to me, it's not necessarily just to limit the gear gap between players, but actually to attempt to create somewhat of an even playing field between players in any given lobby. And I think this is demonstrated by the fact that the first implementation of the system a few patches ago was just a rank-based system and not a gear-based system. I also know that this may end up being a controversial video / topic, but hopefully it sparks some discussion in the comments. Anyways, now that I've established my understanding of what these systems are attempting to do, I'll explain how it actually has the opposite effect. This part is actually a little complicated for me to get into words compared to how it sits in my head, but I'll do my best. Prior to this iteration of the matchmaking system being implemented, I think there was a level of fairness involved in the fact that when you queued into a match, you had no idea how your gear / build would stand up to the other people that got into your lobby. This will be further emphasized once they get rid of the pre-lobby, which they've already stated in Q&A that they plan to do. Essentially, someone could be a giga-geared Chad, more than capable of probably stat-checking you, and someone could be a Timmy in a default kit, but the kicker is that you just didn't know. So you had to play with that in mind, and if you had valuable items on that you wouldn't be too happy to lose, then you might be a little cautious about how you play the match as opposed to just running around and taking every fight you can. With the current system, you can literally guarantee that you are at the very least tied for being the most geared person in the lobby, and from my experience, you typically end up being just the most geared person in the lobby. With that in mind, there's practically no risk and literally nothing / no one stopping you from just running around the lobby and gathering up all the walking loot pinatas. So unless they make 100 different gear score brackets, there will always be players that calculate their gear score to make sure they're at the very top of their bracket, and as such have a guaranteed unfair advantage over every other player in their lobby. And I'll be breaking down the gear score calculation at the end of the video as I said before, but if you want to look at it right now while I discuss things, then you can find it on the Dark and Darker wiki in the gear score section. Hopefully that explained why I feel like this system actually makes lobbies less fair than how it was before, but moving on, I want to talk about how and why the system is abusable, and definitely at that. Currently there are 3 known gear brackets which range from 1 to 199, 200 to 399, and 400 plus, and simply put, each piece of gear has a numerical value attributed to it based on the rarity of the item placed in that slot. So with whatever kit you have on, you can rather easily calculate your total gear score and make adjustments to find yourself in whatever bracket you choose, which also allows you to, for example, go in with the gear score of 199 or 399, ensuring you are the apex predator of that lobby. At least with the prior system, if you wanted to rank up, you would eventually have to play with higher ranked players, as opposed to now, where I, as an Exemplar 2 player, can permanently find myself in this lower gear score bracket, which can have neophytes as an example. I also want to touch on why I think the rank-based version was better overall, and I think most of it stems from the fact that it's not really abusable. If you want to rank up, then you're going to have to play with high-ranked players, and this is pretty much how every other competitive game works as well. Once you get to those higher ranks, I think it's reasonable to assume/expect players to be willing to throw on some gear if they want to be competitive in their lobbies. I'm aware that there will still be people who try to stay in the lower ranks as long as possible with their most juiced kits to try and capitalize on the system, but they can only do that for so long before they inevitably move on to the higher ranked brackets. Also, if this ended up becoming a really large problem for some reason, then I'm sure there are a number of fixes that could be implemented. Take all of these with a grain of salt, but just some potential ideas could be having a gear cap of blues or below for the lower ranked bracket and then open it up completely for the higher ranked bracket. You can also make it so that once you get one character to the higher ranked bracket, all of your other characters automatically start in that bracket. But like I said, those are just surface level ideas, and I don't think the problem would ever be big enough to warrant a change to begin with. I believe it's worth noting as well that, in my opinion, this game does ultimately come down to skill. That skill can certainly be expressed in different ways, whether it's in the middle of a fight, or during the process of picking your build and choosing what gear to wear. I don't think players end up in higher ranks by accident. So if it does seem necessary to try and create an even playing field in every lobby, which I'm not sure is actually healthy for this type of game, but I'll get into that in a moment, I think it's much more effective to section players off by rank, which is probably the best public indicator for someone's skill, as opposed to letting players of all ranks into the same lobbies via a gear score system, where it's pretty obvious to me that the higher ranked players are going to be able to abuse that type of system the most, and you'll inevitably end up with some very unfair lobbies. I'm picturing a demigod player with a gear score of 199 with perfectly picked stats running around in a lobby of neophytes and apprentices in default kits, or some mishmash of whatever gear they decided to throw on. To finish off my yapping though, as for whether or not any type of system like this is healthy for the game, I actually do think that with a healthy enough player base, some sort of rank-based matchmaking could be good for the game, up to the point where it allows new players to get their feet wet with just other new players. Sort of like the rookie rank from Apex Legends, if you're familiar. However, as for gear-based matchmaking, I'm not so sure. I'm open to being swayed, but currently I believe it really takes away one of the core aspects of a game like this, which is the feeling you get whenever you put on some really good gear and are able to go in and have a bit more freedom to clear through the map quickly / take more fights with people with some level of confidence that the gear you are risking will make some of those fights a bit easier. I think the current system is showing it pretty clearly already, with the fact that uncommon gear pieces are quickly becoming extremely expensive / just being bought out of the marketplace altogether, but I don't think people are going to feel very incentivized or even want to put on good gear at all if it means they aren't going to feel any sort of real advantage from it, while also having to risk that much more gold / time invested to build up those kits in the first place. Finally, as for the gear that I'm running throughout the clips in this video, just to go over it really quickly, I've got a Shadow Mask with +2 add magic damage, I've got an Occultist Robe with +1 all attributes, Loose Trousers with +1 all attributes, Lightfoot Boots with +5 add move speed, Ring of Quickness with 2 add magic damage, 1 more Ring of Quickness with 2 add magic damage, Vigilant Cloak with 2 max health, 2 add magic damage, Reinforced Gloves with 2 True Fizz, Monkey Pendant with +1 all attributes, +3 additional magic damage, and then a blue Crystal Sword with +3 additional weapon damage and 5% physical damage bonus. As for the gear score calculation, it's pretty easy to do if you can just pull up the Dark and Darker wiki on your second monitor, or you can just alt-tab back and forth if you've only got one monitor. But as for mine, I like to start off with the chest piece and the pants. They're both uncommon, so they're 15 each, totaling up to 30. I've got 2 uncommon rings, which is 9 each for 18, plus the rare necklace, which is an extra 12, so all of those together is 60. Then it's 12 each for the uncommon helmet, gloves, and boots for an extra 36, plus 20 from the cloak, putting us up to 116 total, plus 60 from the rare two-handed weapon, so we're at 176, and everything else I've just got allotted to consumables, which do count as gear score for some reason. So I've got 9 from the potions of healing for 185, got 6 from the bandages, so we're at 191, and finally 194 and 197 for the campfires. And last but not least, take it easy, chefs.